All right, Tallahassee area, Big Bend area football fans, listen, there's another edition of the Extra Point. It's time to go through our top performers and nominees for the week, the first week, really, opening week of the 21 season. Coach, we had a lot of guys that just balled out. They really just were difference makers on their teams. We had, even in some of the teams that came up a little bit short this past week, these guys were still bright spots around the area. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Jefferson County really was a hard-fought game, and unfortunately the Tigers came up short, but man, this kid was just too awesome to ignore. Xavier Hawkins recorded 3 receptions for 107 yards and 1 touchdown, rushed for 11 carries, 125 yards, and another 2 touchdowns. Then on special teams, Mr. Hawkins really did his thing. Kickoff return for another TD, totaling 4 scores on the night. Really just an offensive, just an offensive powerhouse in and of himself, providing all of that firepower for the Tigers. Then on the defense, Najee Kosi had 16 tackles, 10 solo, 6 assists, 1 caused fumble. And then offensive lineman Corbin Jackson for the Tigers graded out at 94% with 2 pancakes. Man, it's unfortunate that these performances were so good and the Tigers came up short. But, man, if these kids keep these up, look to see them really looking to make some headway on our all-area team at the end of the year.
Yeah, Mark, that's some special performances from some kids. We had a team that struggled last year, didn't have a victory. And now, they're doing the right things. I had a coach to tell me, if you do the little things, the big things will take care of themselves. And let's go on to Florida High. On the offensive side, Drew Farrett, play quarterback, stepped in for Trey Donaldson with 11 for 17 for 196 yards and 2 TDs. He had 7 rushes for 57 yards and 2 TDs. He had an awesome night. On the defensive side, Jordan Gilly, 10 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. The top offensive lineman production was Josh Nabel with 87%, 3 pancakes, and 2 knockdowns. Awesome performance by a young man.
Yeah, Coach, I think, for Florida High, they really, were dominant. They kind of bullied Godby, which is, given the team of, what they've been able to accomplish the last 2 years, they just play aggressive football. Coach Hickman talked about how hard they practice. And then on, I think it was just a team effort. But, man, these guys really stood out. It was really hard to ignore Drew Farrell. In standing on the sidelines, I stood next to Trey Donaldson, and he just talked about how awesome, Farrell was playing and, really had, inspired him a little bit on the sidelines. Just like, you could tell these guys really are supportive of each other, next man up, and it really showed on Friday.
Special night, Mark.
Now for Monroe, Bobcats big shutout win to open up the season 40-0 over FAMU High. Davion Brooks, 10 tackles, 2 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss, and 1 forced fumble. Aristotle Cummins, 7 tackles, 2 sacks, 1 fumble recovery for a safety. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Davion knocked the ball out of the quarterback's hands and Aristotle recovered it for the safety, if I'm not mistaken. It just was a really, Bobcats picking up where they left off from last season, and these guys really stood out on defense.
Yeah, Mark, it seemed like one of the better nights. And like we said in our last show, the Monroe Bobcats are the team to watch and improving and stepping up as being one of the best teams in the area. And now we got Port St. Joe. We got Colin Anderson, who was a top performer all last season. He's just starting back. He just starting over for the 2021 season. He had 17 completions with 23 attempts, 205 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He just continued his success at quarterback and making Port St. Joe one of the tougher opponents in the area.
Yeah, and this is a team that's filled with studs. DJ Oliver, Nick Jefferson. They've got a core there that really manages the power of this team. We saw them in person. The talent was definitely there. Weapons all over the field. So look for Port St. Joe to have at least one nominee every week with the way these guys are playing. Let's go and let's talk about Lincoln, another unfortunate loss here for the capital city. But, man, there were still some Trojans that were able to put up big numbers. Let's go ahead and talk about Aiden Fryer. Passing was 5 of 9 for 45 yards, 1 touchdown, 5 rushes for 73 yards, and a 50-yard score for the young quarterback. And then we want to talk about cornerback Jamarius Spites, had 6 tackles for the defense. Offensive lineman, offensive tackle, Gabe Lane graded out at 80%, 6 pancakes, and no sacks allowed. And then definitely want to mention their kicker, Creek Carter, who was 1 for 1 on field goals and hit 2 for 2 on extra points. So, and I believe he nailed a 28-yarder. So even though it wasn't the Trojans' best night, still some guys were able to shine.
Yeah, you always have some guys that stand out, and you want to recognize. That's why we do this show. We want to recognize the guys that had great performances, and if they keep doing it, we're going to keep doing what we do. Now, JP2 didn't have a successful game. They lost, but on special teams, Mikael Schuler had one of the best plays for the other night with a 91-yard return. Coach thought enough for him to nominate him for this. And although they had a tough night, we had some bright spots to show up.
Yeah, absolutely. Then we have out at Wakulla, and that was really a much closer game than the score really indicated. Wakulla just falling by a single score, and it was hard fought, even in the terrible conditions of the field after all that rain. Tanner Lanier at linebacker recorded 17 tackles, 3 solos, and just a handful of assists. Just a great effort by him at the linebacker position. Also, looking at just really, it's tough to really get traction sometimes when you play in those tough conditions, but he was able to record. You could tell because they just weren't passing the ball. So you could tell he was pretty busy on that night.
Tough night for the Wakulla. It didn't come out with the win, but the statistics stand for themselves. Kid was really active and had a success. He didn't help them. It didn't help them win, but it did help them play better. Now we got Bluntstown on defense for Robert Rosa, 10 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 1 fumble caused, 2.5 tackles for loss. He had an awesome night. Then we have Mari Hoover, 12 carries, 41 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Quarterback Josh Pope, 3 for 5 for 3 TDs. He passed for 72 yards. Some great performances by these young men.
Yeah, and I feel like this list is still a little bit short, Coach. I know there were a host of teams that played, so we want to encourage everybody. If you're watching the podcast, we want to get as many nominees up here as possible. Coaches, go ahead and feel free to send us those stats. We definitely want to make sure we're honoring the right people on Friday nights. And really just, we want to recognize ballers. You only get so many games to really kind of show and prove what kind of skills you have, and we want to make sure that gets recognized. So definitely hit us up on any of our social media platforms, or you can feel free to email us at info@fourquartersonline.com. So, Coach, man, this has just been a pretty good rocky start for some teams, but still a great start for several others, and it shows. This list is only going to get longer, and I'm looking forward to seeing how many guys are going to get back up here next week and in the weeks to come.
I'm agreeing with you on that, Mark. And we got to thank Data Set Ready for sponsoring this segment of our show, sponsoring these young men, making sure that they are getting the recognition they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been another edition of the Xtra Point, where we talk about our area's best top performers for week number 1. So, Coach, I'm looking forward to it. Coming back next week and seeing who's going to get back on this list. So for fourquartersonline.com, I'm Mark Adams, and for Johnny Cofield, this has been the Xtra Point.